help you achieve your goals in the gym with that recovery. Finally,
Video camera. There we go.
Tons of heart problems, myocarditis, and things like that. We know that Nitric Boost is a way to support your heart health. Check out InfoWarsStore.com today and get your bottle of Nitric Boost.
There we go. All right, I am live, about to go on with InfoWars.
Hey, Ivan.
Yeah.
Hey, your camera's a little smudgy, or your lens. Is it possible to maybe wipe your lens off?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you, sir. I'll see you shortly.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
The third hour of the InfoWars Forum brought to you by InfoWars.com. Now, yesterday at the Fauci hearing, you may have seen one Ivan Raiklin behind Fauci's right shoulder. And just to give us an update on what it was like to be at that hearing, where Fauci is clearly lying to the American people, likely perjuring himself. So Ivan joins me now. You didn't know it at the time, Ivan, but that hearing was seen by millions of people. The American people were really tuned into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was it like to actually be there, and what was the vibe in the room as Fauci, one of the dirtiest criminals of all time, in my view, was there testifying?
Yeah, I mean, we talked briefly about it last night on your program, but I'll say this, that, you know, there was a pretty big line for people going into that particular hearing. I was deeply gratified and happy to see that many people that are early critical thinkers, or were early critical thinkers on this particular subject matter, were in line to attend that particular hearing, which means that it was one of the few times that I've seen that, one, the hearing was full, and it was full of patriots. So I would say at least 2/3, maybe the entire crowd, were those that literally wanted to see Anthony Fauci be the number one defendant in Nuremberg 2.0 on steroids times a trillion to the trillionth for maximum consequence.
Well, and normally the human interest in hearings like this.
Oh, and if I may just interject real quick, I noticed the lower third. That's still my account that's censored by Brian Otten, Laura Demlow, Joe Pientka, Elvis Chans of the world over at the FB Live. So if you guys want to follow me on X, it's Ivan Raiklin, my full account. It appears as though that one is not being censored right now. Thank you, Elon.
So I was explaining that because the same thing happened to me. They still have those shadow bans in them. So did you create the new account, and that's your old account that used to be banned?
Correct. So I have now surpassed with the new Ivan Raiklin. I'm still not where I used to be. I capped out at 187,000 followers before the censorship regime and the censorship industrial complex came over to my way. So they went from General Flynn, illegal spying on Trump, then they went after the two hoaxes, then the illegal election, then they started censoring all of us. And now they're trying to cover up their censorship after the illegal election, and then the COVID con, the pandemic, all that stuff, right? It's all interrelated. And it depends on how much you want me to go into each segment of it. Because, man, I've been investigating these fools left and right, up and down, by name, date, place, and transgression for every single treasonous act they've been participants to. And one of the key Nuremberg, I guess, defendants is this Anthony Fauci, Mr. Anthony Fauci.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it sounds like you're at a park or something. I hear the kids playing behind you. You said
Yeah,
to his
we're at a
face,
pool.
you told him to his face the crimes against the children.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people don't understand. I've been saying this for years, and they said, "Oh, get over it. It's already in the past." At the end of the day, in Virginia, there are statutes. I've looked at them, and it's a felony to asphyxiate a child. For those that don't know what asphyxiation is, it's literally to stop and slow down the oxygen flow into another human being. In this instance, it's child asphyxiation. When you, Anthony Fauci, then direct this policy across the nation, and then the states and then the county school boards decide to vote to then force, coerce an emergency use authorized product known as a face toilet, some people pronounce a mask, onto a child against the will of the parents and against the will of the child, that is child asphyxiation, a felony per each count, per each instance where you coerce and compel them into face toileting themselves. Number two, that's child endangerment, child neglect. Those are all felonies. So if you're a school board member here in Fairfax County, Virginia, you have 100,000 students. There's a felony for each individual that you forced to vote in masking for. Emergency use authorized products. All of these things were emergency use authorized products. You're not able to force experiment on people. They can opt out of it completely. And yet Fauci was not singularly, he was one of the co-conspirators along with his boss Mike Pence, who ran the COVID task force in the White House, along with Debbie Birx and all the other scum in there.
Well, and by the way, so you're not even getting into the vaccine issue that they put in all of those kids that was probably giving them all kinds of future health problems.
I don't even go into what they claim to be vaccines, which were also emergency use authorized products. Again, EUAs, never FDA approved. The thing that they claimed to approve was actually never physically produced to inject into people. The ones that they compelled to be injected into people were still the legacy emergency use authorized products. And under law, statute, you cannot force, inject, and compel another human being to basically be an experiment for you. The only time and instance that you can do that is under a presidential waiver that you then compel, and it can only be signed by a president. Let's just make a wrong assumption and say that Resident Biden actually earned his P and is a president. He never actually did a waiver to then authorize the Secretary of Defense to then compel to the consumption of an emergency use authorized product, whether it was a mask, PCR test, or the jabs. Okay. So this entire regime is completely complicit from top down. Fauci, the entire White House coronavirus task force, down the Secretary of Defense, the Office of Personnel Management, OSHA, every single person that was involved in compelling another human being into consuming an emergency use authorized product against their will is a felon at a minimum, a traitor more likely than not, and must be held to account to the maximum allowable. And in this instance, the maximum allowable, and there's more than two witnesses to this, and that's called treason. So now we need to start to action these particular co-conspirators.
Did you get the sense in the room that Fauci was nervous?
A couple of people that were on the sides next to me said, his hands were shaking. He was kind of like in anguish. And I would say that he was in anguish because I had the opportunity to maraud him as he walked in to the Rayburn building. Then another instance when he actually walked into the room before he sat down. That I haven't disclosed yet other than on my ex subscribers. I'm going to do a compilation video and I'll provide it to you hopefully when we have it put together tomorrow. And then the last instance was at the very end when I talked about, hey, buddy, you're involved in crimes against humanity along with all of these felonies of all the children that you asphyxiated with these face toilets. And in addition to that, during the hearing, and you're seeing that right there, thank you. During the hearing, you had individuals in the room every time Fauci said something, anytime he created a sound, you would hear in the background, liar, liar. And it wasn't loud enough for Congressman Brad Wenstrup, the chairman of that subcommittee, to hear it. But it was noticeable. And I was literally about the same distance as those individuals were saying liar. He definitely could hear it because he was closer. Liar. There were a couple of individuals that stood up and said, I can't take this anymore. This guy is a total mass murder. One lady walked out. Another she claimed she was a doctor, stood up and said something similar, walked out. So literally probably every minute or two, you would hear individuals just completely, mumbling under their breath, and he could hear it. Or they just blatantly stood up. And as they walked out, because they just couldn't handle it anymore, the lies and the deceit and the corruption and the cover-ups of this absolute treasonous, mass murderous scum was sitting before them. They just couldn't control themselves. And then a couple of individuals made some sad faces to the, Fauci wanted to play the victim, right?
Yeah, that was Brandon Fellows. He's a former prisoner, January 6th political prisoner. Now he's at these hearings. And, this is a sign of the
Former
American
January
people
6th
waking up.
political hostage that was exercising his First Amendment uh, against the stolen, illegal conducted election. By the way, Fauci's policies, along with Mike Pence, ushered in 39 states completely violating their election laws and ushering the pandemic COVID measures that would then facilitate the illegal 2020 electoral heist. Like, that's how important this whole Fauci component is.
Yeah, so to me, having that room filled with people that know what's going on, and
yep.
It was kind of the same thing that happened to me when I went into the Trump fake impeachment hearing. I didn't plan on standing up that day. It was like, this whole thing is a sham. I'm an American. I have a First Amendment right, and I'm going to execute it right now. And so, do you suspect this trend to continue with these hearings?
I do, absolutely. You gave the example of delivering the truth, whatever the cost. You're a prime example of that. You're the probably one of, if not the most courageous First Amendment journalists that are out there. That basically, you know what? Yes, you're a journalist. You're supposed to report on what's going on, but at the same time, you're an American citizen. And when you see a complete belligerent violation of our First Amendment and our constitutional order, you kind of step up and say, "Hey, I've had enough." As a grown man, as an alpha man, you stood up and then stood your ground. And that's why I respect you. Anytime you call me to come on the show, everyone else takes second fiddle because they didn't deliver the truth, whatever the cost, like you've done. And I totally respect you, Owen. So I'm always honored to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know you're down there in the swamp dealing with these swamp goblins, these swamp creatures every day.
And look at you, like completely peaceful, not resisting anything. You're just making First Amendment sounds, and they don't like it.
And I've been on probation since that day. So I'm like 5 years on probation for that.
It's ridiculous.
And you know that's totally unprecedented. You've been down there in the swamp. You know most of the time these people, they do an interruption, pink hat wear, climate change, whatever. They just get removed from the building. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. And again, it goes back to what we said last night. The reason why this happens to people like you and others, and maybe it'll eventually happen to me, but the reason why I think I've been able to avoid it up to this point is because you have to understand the political leadership in the House and the Senate at the time that you're exercising your First Amendment against the prevailing narrative. So in your instance, the Speaker of the House was Nancy Pelosi. You were in the House offices, right, at a hearing. And so when you have a Speaker of the House, Pelosi, and she controls the House Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving at the time, that she reappointed, by the way, was also the Sergeant at Arms for Paul Ryan and John Boehner before that, and was complicit in the January 6th Fedsurrection coordination and development. When you have people like that have the discretionary authority on determining whether to criminalize you for your First Amendment or not, they're going to lean towards criminalizing you because you are their political opponent. And so that's why when you see these insurrections taking place in the Cannon Building, such as in October of 2023, or at the DNC that happened in December of 2023 with the quote unquote Hamas insurrection that was at the DNC, all within the jurisdiction of the U.S. Capitol Police. And when you have a U.S. Capitol Police chief that is appointed by Pelosi and Schumer, he has the discretionary authority on who he goes after, along with his general counsel, Tad DeBias. In my instance, I am always trying to make sure that I'm maximally compliant with the rules of the House. I come up there, I'm cordial with the U.S. Capitol Police officer that has jurisdiction over that particular wing. When I first started coming up there early last year, I said, "Hey, I'm going to try to comply with what I understand to be the rules." If for any reason I'm getting close to kind of crossing that line, please afford me the opportunity to give me a fair shake warning. He's like, yeah, absolutely. And that's not just him, it's everybody basically gives me a fair shake warning. And I haven't gotten to that threshold because the key here is do not disrupt a proceeding that's going on. And so there's no disruption of a proceeding. When I let Anthony Fauci walk by me and then behind him he's walking forward, no one can say that I'm slowing and disrupting his movement. All I'm doing is making sounds. And then once he goes and starts, once the gavel kicks in at one of these hearings, I have to remain quiet and silent, right? Otherwise, if I do say something, then they got to give you the fair warning. I try not to let them give me a warning because then, at the end of the day, then they can use anything to kind of throw me out afterwards. So I've been very meticulous, deliberate. Honestly, I got to say that your experience has informed how I operate within the House chambers. So thank you. But at the end of the day, somebody had to be first. You were the first one. At the end of the day, those that are first are taking the brunt of the pain from the deep state. But by the time the second and third people come in, it's a lot easier to expose these scums. So again, I got to bring it back to you, brother. Thank you for working that. You gave me the motivation to continue to.
Well, that means a lot. I mean, that's why I do it. I want to inspire other people not to do anything illegal or violent, but to save this country peacefully, politically, with our document rights. Are there any other regulars up there? I mean, because I feel like it's inevitable. For Ivan Raiklin to have, regulars that he goes in there with.
So Ashley Babbitt's mother, Nikki Whithoff, is a very regular, along with Nicole Reffitt and some other folks that are there on the corner, basically supporting those January 6th political hostages that are still in the DC gulag. You also have a couple of outliers out there that walk in, and they're definitely on our side. You saw one of the individuals that were sitting up front was, I don't know her name or her background, but she's been at, I think, every single COVID select hearing that's taken place. And she in the hallways I've spoken to her, she said, I'm a total left-wing Democrat. But what Anthony Fauci did with this whole DNA mutilation injection and myocarditis making, heart exploding policies that he promulgated, like, I think this lady knows Fauci's kind of antics going back to what he did with the whole HIV AIDS, pandemic. Again, forced consumption of unsafe and ineffective products. Remember the AZT that Fauci was behind? I mean, a lot of us.
Yeah, there's a whole movie about that, Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah, so, I mean, it. Many people forget it. Many lemmings out there just continue to consume the Paul Ryan faux news, the John Brennan induced and influenced criminal news network, and then the Jim Comey and Andy McCabe coerced, infused, manipulated, doctored MSLSD. So they're still in the matrix. Once we can help them off-ramp off of that censorship industrial complex, media disinformation complex, and onto free speech platforms, they're going to be rudely awakened. But I'm not going to go to where they are. They need to come to us because we've been leaders in this particular movement. I'm not going over to Facebook and CommieTube to pull them off. Like, if they want to survive and not get mutilated and destroyed and murdered by our government, then they need to have some critical thought. Otherwise, I mean, please continue to mutilate yourselves, and then you can no longer have offspring. And I think society writ large will benefit from that if you're going to be that intellectually weak. It sounds crass, but we've tried for 4 years, Owen, you and I, and others, and everybody listening into this program. At this point, we just got, I mean, at what point do you stop helping someone when they refuse to be helped? Like, there's people that were in that line that were still wearing face toilets. And I asked, why aren't you wearing two? What changed? It's ridiculous.
So what do you think is next for Fauci? Because, I mean, I have very little confidence anything will happen to that Kremlin. But what do you think is next? Anything? Is this it for him?
No, so, I mean, I think the most influential person, I would say that the two most powerful people on the planet right now to be able to create some sort of accountability is Elon Musk in terms of the digital ecosystem and what he sits on in terms of internal documents, whether it's Slack channels, emails, or direct messages and content related to all these scum that are, I mean, my deep state target list that I aired for the first time on InfoWars a couple of months ago at this point, there's a category called COVID Con, pandemic. And so some of those individuals have Twitter accounts, the CDC, and all these staffers have Twitter accounts. I want Elon Musk to go ahead and go in and do a deep dive and then go ahead and release his Fauci files that he's promised us. It's telling to me that when Elon Musk basically said his pronouns were arrest Fauci, he's probably doing that based on what he's seen on internal holdings of Twitter. He's also been talking about that in replies to different tweets over the last 24, 48 hours in the run up to this COVID select hearing. So I suspect, I mean, again, I don't know full proof, but based on the breadcrumbs and indications of what I'm observing, Michael Schellenberger, and in my interactions with Schellenberger and Taibbi, as well as their obviously public postings collectively, whether it's Musk, Schellenberger, and Taibbi, I think we're moving towards Fauci files release that will then convince the entire world that this guy's a total Nuremberg defendant that needs to be dealt with appropriately for his mass murdering. And then the second most influential, powerful person on the planet is the guy that can allocate $6 trillion a year into the global budget. And that's the Speaker of the House. So I'm suspecting that it would take us to motivate Schellenberger and Taibbi to then get Elon Musk motivated to work hand in glove with Mike Johnson to then go ahead along with him and society, like literally have a press conference where Elon Musk, Mike Johnson, Jim Comer, Barry Loudermilk, what's his name, Brad Wenstrup, and Jim Jordan all sit together and put out a press release where they basically say, this is all we've done the last 15 months in the House, and this is all investigative work, and this is all of what the mother of all Twitter of file holdings, Elon Musk, has, so that it exposes to the entire world that what the General Flynn movie called Flynn Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost, the same people that targeted General Flynn to stop him from coming into office and remaining there to expose these scum are the same people that covered up, that did the censorship industrial complex, that did the First Amendment violation, Fourth, Fifth, etc. And then the pandemic, all are the same people in the United States leading the effort to destroy our constitutional order. And that will create the necessary evidence for the American public to then be the jury pool at every single lawsuit that's going to come after that, to be clamoring for a guilty verdict for the hundreds of thousands of people that were involved in some way, shape, or form in the pandemic, in the First Amendment violations, in the censorship industrial complex, in everything.
I just hope that the congressmen that you just mentioned have the spine and the will to do that, which is the right thing. Ivan Raiklin, thank you so much.
Thanks, Owen. All right. I think that's it, right? Hopefully. I got to go back to chilling with my kids.
Everybody knows. I've got my hands.
Is that it, Mr. Producer?
Yeah, yes.
All right, great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. All right, with that, oh, wow, look at this. I got 3,300 people tuning in across the different platforms. I will sign off now. Thanks for tuning in.